What is up, YouTube? Scott Torre here to bring you a new build guide about Trickster Caustic Arrow. Now, me personally, I'm incredibly excited about this video because Caustic Arrow is actually weirdly one of my most favorite builds in general. As you saw from last league, we made a Raider Caustic Arrow, which I had a lot of fun with and was incredibly powerful. However, this one has the potential to have significantly more deeps. Well, I guess in this case, damage over time. Now, this build is not fully min-maxed by any means, and that was the reason why I was a little bit on the fence about making this video yet. I only make videos on builds that I truly personally enjoy playing, that I've had a lot of fun with, and I want to share with you guys, and that are complete normally. However, in this case, I was able to clear all endgame content from Awaken 8, Uber Atziri, Uber Elder, literally everything, 100% Delirious maps, no problem, fully juiced with Scarabs, everything. And like I said, it's not fully ready yet. We're still able to do it. So may as well share with you guys, get your input. Now, if you do truly enjoy my content and want to see more, make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. I truly appreciate it. And catch my live streams at twitch.tv/ScottTorre. And you're always welcome to join my Discord or tweet me at Kevin Raisins and get more questions if you have about this build or any of the other builds, or join my Discord server. All these links are going to be down below. So without further ado, let's get right into it. In this video, we're going to start off with our path of building to showcase our tree, where we go toward in our tree during the leveling process, as well as nodes we take more toward the end game, as well as jewels, gems, and our overall configuration to showcase how we're able to reach the damage that we're able to reach without any kind of funky nonsense to try and juice our damage. Then we're going to talk about our gear, how to craft that gear, what is better gear that we should be striving for and gearing toward. Then we're going to talk about our Pantheon, which ones we're taking from our major and our minor, as well as what bandits we take or kill all. Then finally, we're going to showcase the build's power with an Uber Atziri kill. That way you guys can see it in action. Let's begin with our path of building configuration and tree. The first thing we're going to talk about is the skill tree and path of building, and how we're getting the damage we're getting. Now, in this section, we're going to talk a little bit about the gear. However, a lot of the gear talk is going to be reserved for the gear section of this video. So without further ado, if you don't have path of building, I highly recommend you download it immediately, especially if you're ever going to follow any kind of build guide and stuff like that. You'll always see a paste bin, which is you just paste from paste bin right here, and boom, you import the build and you're good. I also run the community fork for it, as you can see down here. I'm going to have that link down below as well. So after you install Path of Building, you install the community fork, and it gives you just a little bit more access into a little bit more details about each build that you're uploading. So it's just a very good thing to have. You can tell if you successfully installed it because the colored resistance is here, and then a little bit more access to different stuff that you might not see in the normal version. So let's go ahead and hop right into it. In this tree, you can see overall, we were able to hit 3.1 million damage over time. Shaper damage over time. You're gonna hear me say the words deeps or DPS a lot. Whenever I say that, I actually just mean damage over time. It's just habit. I also just like saying the word deeps. So just putting that out there. And then as you can see, it is in fact boss Shaper deeps. If it wasn't, we're pushing more like 5.7 million. However, the bosses are the important thing, right, guys? We're trying to bring down the big end game content. And like I said, this build is not even min-maxed. I don't even have a Watcher's Eye. A Watcher's Eye is 24% increased damage over time multiplier when we're affected by malevolence. That's huge deeps alone. The amulet, we'll get into gear in the next section. So without further ado, when you're starting to level this build, I always take these early chaos damage nodes. That's something I want to point out. Anytime you see builds that do this alternate avenue of approach, a lot of times it's usually once they're toward their end game content and they're actually trying to save nodes. We actually save 2 passive nodes by going around. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then right into our tree, versus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So instead, we're able to take things like Wicked Paul or things that do a lot more for us than just 10% increased chaos damage. And we're also satisfying some of our intelligence requirements for our gear too by bypassing that. So anyway, we'll go through those nodes. I usually go ahead and head toward atrophy first. That is because we have life nodes into damage, into more life, into damage. So like that balance just really solid and really good. And then we make our way down here. We grab more damage, and you can usually, I don't grab this quite yet. If you do feel as though you need the life, then by all means grab it. I actually end up going toward this life instead, mainly because we have this damage wheel right here. So we grab the life or the damage first, whichever one you're hurting on. Right now I have an intuitive leap, so once you're in the end game, you're starting to push toward a min-max, and you're actually trying to apply the Val Grace or Divergent Grace, which is something we're going to get into in this video. That's where you're going to take like reduced mana reserve and charisma. However, you don't do this intuitive leap until like you're pushing toward that. For now, just take the wheel, grab Method to Madness, you're good. This cluster is probably going to be your final like push and your final stretch. The cluster itself, I think I paid 2 Exalt for. I don't know where the prices are at right now. I think last I checked, it was about 2 Exalt, maybe 1 Exalt, which, to be fair, compared to most like great rolled cluster jewels, that's not bad. Most cluster jewels are you're going to see around 10 to 20, even 30 Exalt for. This is an 8 small passive, so you want the leaser amount of small passives, the better. And on a large cluster, 8 small passives is the best. And that is because you're saving on having to take these small nodes and you go directly into the big notables. As you can see, I'm only taking 2 small passives. All the rest are notables and jewel sockets. So the smaller the passives, the better. I think these medium clusters, I don't remember the price. Maybe they're like 1 or 2 Exalt. They weren't terrible either. However, like I said, if you don't have the funds for it yet, you do have nodes like down here headed toward Master Fletcher, where you're able to increase your damage over time. You're able to take nodes like this one here, kind of close the gaps on some of these, grab Deadly Draw until you can afford your cluster jewel. Then I make my way down here. I personally luckily had Thread of Hope drop for my first Cirrus kill. However, that jewel itself is probably about 30 chaos, maybe 40, depending on what the elemental resistance roll is. This allows access to things like Bravery, Unyielding, and a Discipline of Slaughter, which is minimum frenzy, minimum endurance, and you actually gain frenzy charges on kill as well as endurance charges on kill, and you also get 8% increased damage per endurance and frenzy charges from between these two. We're also grabbing Fury Bolts here. Now, if you don't have the funds for this one either, you actually can take these projectile damage nodes and grab all this stuff. Anything that says increased projectile damage is actually scaling our Caustic Arrow too, so those are not wasted nodes by taking those. Let's go ahead and go straight into a little bit about the skills. Like I said, we're not going to talk too much about the items until we get to our items section. I'm just going to kind of reference them. These are our aura setup. Now, I use a Divergent Grace because a normal Grace, if I remember correctly, is just more of an increased AoE for you and your nearby allies. However, with a Divergent one, we're able to actually have you and allies have 4% chance to avoid chaos damage from hits. It's actually, I mean, it's not great, but it's actually doing something for us and an increased AoE, which doesn't really matter. So either or, and like I said, you don't actually have to run this. The only reason I am is because I had a bunch of mana just not being used. So I went ahead and grabbed a level 4 Enlighten and then stuck it in there. And then that's when I grabbed those nodes over here so I can reduce my mana reserve. And then I was able to successfully take that. Now, once we do take it, I'm pretty sure we still have plenty of mana. We have 106 left over and our skill's only 40 and attack speed doesn't matter to us. So I use Malevolence, Grace. Like I said, Grace is not needed. It's just when you have the spare mana, Clarity, and then an Aspect of the Cat. Now, Aspect of the Cat is very, very important to put on a piece of gear that has sockets on it, not on a belt or a piece of jewelry. So that's something we're going to get into in the gear section. I just want to point that out now. And if I do forget to talk about it in the gear section, remind me in the comments down below, and I will answer the reason why there. So going into our Caustic Arrow, we're looking at a level 29. Yeah, so it's 29 Caustic Arrow. That's from our bow. Once again, we're going to talk about that in our section, in the gear section. So we're running Conk Effect, Awakened Gems, level 4 in power. This is the juice. So let's go into our configuration here. Now, since we are currently running a Feral's Fur, which there are alternatives, we'll go into that in a little bit. Power charges, we're always at max power charges. So we're always at max frenzy charges, and we're always, well, to be fair, endurance charges we're not necessarily always, because that's one of the few that's on kill. Frenzy and power just generate on their own from Feral's Fur. So we can go ahead and unallocate that and just drops us to 3 million DPS. So not really a big deal there. Pretty much nothing else here. The only other thing I have is Withered stacks. So since we're dropping 3 Withered totems on the boss really quickly, hitting 15 stacks is incredibly easy to do. You get 15 stacks really fast. So 15 stacks, and then I don't have anything else checked. I'm sure you can get other things checked on here to squeeze out more damage, because we might be pushing more damage. I just don't want to like pull wool over your eyes and make it this build look like it's the greatest thing ever. When you're like, you're doing some crazy stuff to get there. Literally 2 things checked, 15 stacks of Withered, which is all. This is provided from Feral's Fur, and this is provided from 3 spell totems. So anyway, without further ado, let's go into the gear section. Next, let's talk about the gear we currently have, how we crafted it, how you can craft it, and then gear that we could potentially get and strive for. The next thing we're going to talk about is gear. Overall, the gear is being presented on the screen. I've probably spent about 11 to 12 Exalt. To be fair, that's within the last about 2 or 3 weeks. So prices on various items fluctuate accordingly as different streamers, different YouTubers create different builds. It tends to fluctuate the market accordingly. So going into this, I've actually crafted pretty much everything here, except for obviously the unique items, Feral's Fur. And I ended up buying or trading for my quiver just because it's a very awkward craft and a very difficult mods to hit on it. So I figured I'd spend the 2 Exalt to just have it done. And then also I got really lucky with these boots. This is something that could relatively be a very expensive item. I personally just got really lucky in one of the temples where they dropped and it worked out for me. That's something I do want to annotate before you guys get up in arms about these gorgeous boots that are here. So let's start off with the penetrating arrow quiver. The reason why we choose the penetrating arrow quiver over any other base is because of the ability for arrows to pierce an additional target. Whenever you're using Caustic Arrow, you're trying to get through the first line of defense, those first couple characters, into the middle of a pack, so that way the Caustic Ground can take out the entire pack at one time instead of having a dual shot, multiple packs as you're presenting your playthroughs through different maps, etc., etc. So that's pretty much the only base that actually helps us remotely. Now, if you're trying to craft this quiver yourself, some methods I've kind of like toyed around with the idea of is alt spamming for damage over time multiplier, which is just an inherent mod that lands on any base quiver, whether it's influenced or not. And then trying to like augment into maybe a life roll or into a resistance roll or something else that just kind of helps you remotely. As you can see in this quiver right here, the only mods that help me at all is my 2 damage over time multipliers, and then the max life, which I bench crafted. So getting 2 mods that actually help you, and then filling up the 3rd affix with a regal hit, and then hoping that you fill up your prefix slots. So if you have one prefix being, I don't know, max life, and then another prefix being pretty much anything at all, and then your regal slam into any kind of suffix, you bench craft a prefix, that way you block all 3, and then you hunter orb slam into chaos damage over time multiplier. Now the reason why I say that so casually is because on quivers, hunters only have 3 different possible modifiers that you could hit. So you have a 33% chance to actually hit the usable chaos damage over time multiplier. So it is actually kind of a fair craft. However, hunter orbs are extremely expensive. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. If the price of a hunter orb is worth I think last time I checked was about 400 chaos investment for a 33% chance of hitting the mod you want. Something that I leave up to you. Like I said, I personally just spent like 2 Exalt, and then boom, I had this quiver, which cost me what I think the price of Exalts are about 60 chaos right now. So it was 120 chaos for guaranteed rolls. I'll buy it. They're both tier 2s, whereas you can actually have a better chance, an opportunity to hit tier 1 rolls, which would be more deeps. However, that's pretty much all you really have when it comes to quivers. There's not a whole lot of mods that really help you out. So we actually go into Feral's Fur as our chest piece of choice. This is mainly because Aspect of the Cat reserves no mana. And most importantly, the main reason why this chest is so powerful is because you gain up to max number of frenzy and power charges when you gain Cat's stealth. Now, being able to generate frenzy and power charges based around our ascendancy, where we're getting an additional, I believe it was 8% increased damage per frenzy and per power charge, just without increasing our max total. That's what, 6 times 8. So you're getting a lot of damage. Now, if you don't have the currency for a Feral's Fur, I think this cost me like 5 Exalt, which is a lot of money to save up for. Cherubim's Maleficence is actually a very viable option. I do believe you actually get a little bit more damage out of it as well, A perfectly rolled increased chaos damage at 80% is probably going to set you back maybe 10, maybe even 15 chaos. So that's literally like 1 or 2 maps, and boom, you can afford a chest piece. And it does not even have to be 6 linked, since your 6 link is going to be in your bow regardless. So this is a huge damage buff. However, Cherubim is your ultimate goals, which, or excuse me, Pharaoh's Fur is your ultimate goals, which you're going toward. Now the bow craft itself, this is one of like the cream de la crops. This is one of the bases that could cost you between 1 to 2 exalts, depending on the current market price and what builds people are using at the moment. I know a lot of people toward League Start are running things like ED Contagion and Poison BV. So getting an implicit with a 40% increased chaos damage mod on it is very, very difficult to find, as well as one that's able to find at a cheap price. So this one I think I paid maybe 1 exalt for. The base itself doesn't really matter. I chose Thicket Bow because it does have a higher APS, which means I'm able to shoot my arrows a little bit quicker. However, that doesn't affect our DPS whatsoever, because Caustic Ground doesn't stack the more times you fire it. So you just fire, forget, and that's it. The more times you shoot it, has no effect whatsoever on your damage. So the base itself really doesn't matter. It's more of a personal preference. I like Thicket Bows. I like the quicker shot initially. But as long as you get the 40% increased chaos damage implicit, you're fine. Synthesis, and since it doesn't have to be influenced whatsoever, it really doesn't matter. Ignore the enchantment I have on here. I was trying to get a chaos modifiers have a 6% increased effect. However, that was getting really costly to do that, so I just kind of gave up on that endeavor. However, when it comes to the min-max, this is something that you could pursue and get some value out of. Now, in order to craft this bow, once we have our base, I used a 3-socket resonator. You could also use a website called Craft of Exile, which is right here. And this will allow you to look at different ways to craft different things. So in order to get the perfect bow for Caustic Arrow, the 3 modifiers you're going to want are +1 to socketed gems, +1 to strength gems, and +1 to dexterity gems. Because the 2 key aspects that are going to help juice our damage when it comes to Caustic Arrow is gem levels, as well as chaos damage over time multipliers, etc. But the only inherent mods that actually affect our build is damage over time multiplier, and since that has such a low weight, we're more focused on scaling gem level, which is superior anyway. Now right now our Caustic Arrow is at level 29. Once we yoke out our amulet, we could probably squeeze out 2 more levels, but we'll get to that in a second. In a perfect world, we'll hit those 3 mods whenever we fossil craft using a corroded fossil, a metallic fossil, and a fauceted fossil. Now last I checked, fauceted fossils are going for about 30 chaos each. Each one of these other fossils, to include the resonators, are probably about 1 chaos each. So it is relatively cheap craft. However, you're probably going to be doing it a number of times in order to hit the mods that you can use. Now, the important thing to note when it comes to fossil crafting these mods is in a perfect world, you want 1 open suffix and 2 open prefixes, so that way you can multi-mod on it. So if I did not have +1 to socketed bow gems on here, that actually shares the same modifier tag as +2 to socketed support gems that you can bench craft on there. So that actually effectively blocks me from being able to bench craft that on here. So this bow is not actually the best bow I could get, but it's pretty darn close. So in a perfect world, that mod would not be on there, and I would actually have 1 less suffix on here, so that way I can bench the multi-mod craft. However, since we don't have access to that, the +40% to chaos damage over time multiplier is extremely powerful mod for us. And we do get the +1 to socketed bow gems, which is still helpful. And the +1 to socketed gems is actually going to both level not only Caustic Arrow, but it's also going to level our support gems, which are our Awakened gems. And then it's also going to level our Empower, which in turn gives an additional level to Caustic Arrow. So that's +2 levels from that 1 mod. And then +1 to socketed dexterity gems is going to yoke out not only our support gems that are dexterity, which is 4 out of 6 of them, as well as our Caustic Arrow. Well, I guess theoretically speaking, 3 support gems, and then Caustic Arrow itself. So that's 1 level there. And then strength gems, which is going to yoke out our Empower to give another additional level to Caustic Arrow. So as you can see, this this bow is giving our Caustic Arrow quite a bit of levels at +8 total, to include our levels from the Empower gem, which is just absolutely bonkers. Now going into our gloves, something that's important to note is I have Aspect of the Cat on them. However, you can actually put that on any piece of gear, specifically gear that has gem slots on it, because you're going to want to put an less duration support gem on it. I personally picked up a level 21 Doesn't really matter too much if you get 20 versus 21. At least I don't really notice a huge difference. However, I think it was like 4 chaos for level 21, so may as well, right? The reason why I say you want to put it on a piece of gear instead of something like your belt or your amulet or your rings, which we most commonly see, is so that way you can add that. And you'll notice during this entire video, I permanently have frenzy charges, which is the most important one. We do get damage from power charges, and you can see there's a 1 second delay in there, which is something we could theoretically scale with just a minor increased duration for power charges on the tree or something like that. But we really don't care too much because there's a 1 second difference there. But our frenzy charges are permanently there. That's mostly from our passive tree. And that's why if we didn't have less duration on here, there would be, I think it's a more like an 8 second delay in there. And that's when we start using things like frenzy. Now, frenzy is something I do hold on to, as well as GMP, because of the culling strike on it. That way, when I'm fighting those really big bosses, or we're in a 100% delirium map and you've got those real thick big enemies that are in there, you're able to just one-shot them once they get within that 10% life mark. So that's really key. Now, I actually ended up crafting these gloves myself. You can actually buy a very close pair for probably about 50 chaos or less. I've actually got a pair right now. I have in my sales tab, I have it up for 60 chaos, but it hasn't sold in like 60 chaos, and it hasn't sold in the last like 2 weeks. So I probably have to drop that price even lower. But as you can see, they're relatively cheap. Or the way I crafted it, I used pristine fossils as well as aberrant fossils. Pristine fossils, more life mods, and then aberrant, which means more chaos mods. So your ultimate goal is to hit great life with chaos damage over time multiplier being a tier 1. And then personally, I needed the open suffix for aspect of the cat. However, like I said, you can also put that on things like your helmet or your boots. But you don't want to put it in anything where you can't put a socket on or a less duration gem on. So it was a relatively easy aircraft, especially since both of these fossils are relatively cheap, especially aberrant fossils are about 1 chaos. And then the resonators are probably about 1 chaos, maybe even 2 or 3 to 1. And then going into the rings, I actually essence craft these rings using the essence of, I think it was essence of dread. Yes. It was essence of envy. That's right. So increased chaos damage. The highest tier one is actually going to give you 34% increased chaos damage. So I literally just kept hitting these rings until I got usable mods. So I got tier 1 life. Actually, this might be tier 2. Oh, just tier 1 life, and then my chaos damage, and then I just kind of adjusted fire and actually made it to where I was able to resistance fix. And I just did that with both of these. So just keep hitting it with essences until you can hit some good rolls. Otherwise, there's really nothing that you can get on rings that are super helpful, that are at least better than that. You could get Despair on hit, but you're losing damage from just self-casting Despair, linked with Impending Doom. So same thing with the Stygian Vise. I was just rolling tier 1 life, and I ended up augmenting into another good resistance. Oh no, this is 4 mods, so I just was doing Scouring Orbs and Alchemy Orbs until I just hit good mods. Or you can pick one up. I think right now, tier 1 life with a great resistance and maybe a decent secondary resistance is probably going for about 50 or 60 chaos right now. So it's not a super overpowered expensive belt, but it's also not the cheapest. So you can just pick one up for about 50 or 60 chaos. These boots, however, like I said, I got pretty lucky with them. You're wanting plus 30% movement speed. In this case, I also had an additional 5% movement speed if I haven't been hit recently, being that we are an evasion build, that actually comes in very much handy. As well as 2 decent resistances, and I believe that's a tier 1 life roll. So yeah, I actually got lucky enough to have these drop. However, if you find a pair of boots like these on the market, they're probably going to go for about 2 exalt, maybe even 4, depending on which resistances and what the base is, etc. This base eel skin boots aren't the greatest, but the mods get me there, so I don't really much care about it. So the amulet, that's something that's very important to note. This is probably one of the more expensive crafts as well, or the more expensive bases to try and pick up. So just the hunter base itself is probably about 30 chaos. At least that's how much I paid for it. The prices may have started to go down as the league progresses. However, the optimal rolls we can get on it is max life plus 2 to your caustic arrow. So you get plus 1 to dexterity gems and plus 1 to all chaos gems. So those 2 added together juice up your caustic arrow twice. And then chaos damage over time multiplier is a tier 1 roll. Now, if you're able to get all 4 of those, you probably have pretty close to a mirror tier item. So you're probably not going to get all of those outside of Harvest League. However, as you can see, all I have on this is tier 1 life with chaos damage over time multiplier. I don't even have a resistance. Those are literally the only 2 modifiers on this amulet that are helping me out at all. I bench crafted the fire resistance on it, but all the other mods on this are just terrible. I pretty much just got this base and spammed it with aberrant fossils, just more chaos modifiers until I got usable mods, and I was able to successfully hit that. I ended up allocating dirty techniques from the passive tree, which is 10% increased chaos damage over time multiplier, which is pretty nice damage. There are superior like nodes you could take that are more oriented around juicing up your curse, your despair curse, which would actually in turn give you more damage. However, I'm more practical. I'm not planning on cursing all the time, especially since I am a self-cursed build. I'm not going to be cursing packs as I'm pushing through, so I just kind of want more easily accessible damage. And then finally, we're going to talk about our helmet. The most optimal helmet you could get, obviously, we need the Uber Enchant 40% increased chaos or caustic arrow damage. AoE doesn't really matter for us too much. I mean, if you feel comfortable in your damage and you just want better clear speed, AoE is okay. But our damage is really going to come from 40% increased caustic arrow damage. Even the additional arrows probably it doesn't matter because overlap doesn't give us more damage. Now you want this on an item level 86 helmet. As you can see, mine's only a 75. As I stated in the beginning of this video, this is not at all min-max. I'm able to clear all in-game content, and I've killed every single boss in the game. And this build is not even remotely fully geared out. The reason why you want an I-86 is because you can then hit it with a hunter orb or have it come already as a hunter, and you can get nearby enemies have -6, I believe, -6 or -9 to chaos resistance, which when anytime you reduce an enemy's resistance, they take a significantly large amount of damage. So that's an additional modifier that you could hit. However, outside of that, any other item level is fine. Like as you see here, I've only got an item level 75. I have great life on it, 2 great resistance rolls. And honestly, when I was hitting this one, I believe I was using essences. I was trying to hit it with resistance essences, so that way it can get like a usable life and a usable secondary resistance, so that way I can kind of help res fix. And then, you know, that I ended up hitting 116 max life, and I couldn't roll over that, so I was completely fine with it. And when it comes to our flasks, I had a Dying Sun drop from Shaper. However, last I checked, I believe these were going for about like anywhere between 10 to 20 chaos, maybe. It pretty much, it allows your caustic arrow to fire 2 additional arrows, and it increases the area of effect. So this is really good for like pack clearing during your maps and stuff like that. This isn't going to help you with your boss damage. Whenever you're doing your single target engagements, literally does nothing for you except increases your area of effect. But I do use defensive flask with quartz and stibnite. This helps us out with some of those oh no type of situations. However, once you are min-maxing and you have a bunch of exalt to spend, a bottled faith is actually one of your really pristine flasks that you could pick up. However, I believe those are going for about 10 exalt. So for the price of that 1 flask, you can pretty much pick up the rest of this gear. Or excuse me, you can craft the rest of this gear. Just buying this bow alone would be a lot more expensive to do. However, I've noticed just crafting it yourself is a lot easier, in my opinion, on the wallet. And then I also use a Quicksilver for movement speed, and of course a bleed flask. I do need to change this into a bubbling. Bubbling is just easier for those quick recoveries. I just haven't gotten around to doing it yet. But yeah, that's all when it comes to gear. One final thing I do want to touch base on just a little bit is I do have a Corrupted Blood jewel I keep in my inventory, just so whenever I do fight Cirrus, I have a habit of forgetting to socket it, so I just keep it in my inventory, and I just replace one of these jewels with it. This one's probably the lesser of the 2 because it only has increased chaos damage and chaos.multi, whereas this one has chaos damage, .multi, and a secondary increased damage over time. So this one's obviously more damage, so I'll probably take this one out and I'll swap that in there. We're still easily able to comfortably kill Cirrus even with a slight DPS hit, but it's not really that much of a big deal. The jewel I'm using in my Stygian Vise, something I did forget to talk about, and I do apologize, is more for resistance fixing in life. As you can see, there's really no damage modifiers. The only one you could hit on a eye jewel that benefits you when it comes to damage is increased damage while holding a 2-handed weapon if you've killed recently, which really doesn't help you against things like Cirrus or Shaper or those single target bosses that don't have any ads for you to kill. So I usually use these spots for life, resistance. If you need like an intelligence or strength fix, you can also stick that on your eye jewel. It's another opportunity to have modifiers on your gear, which you can replace for damage elsewhere. So that's pretty much it when it comes to gear. Let's get into this. Now let's talk about our Pantheon selections from our minor and our major Pantheons, as well as what bandits we take or kill all. The next thing I want to talk about is Pantheons, as well as our choice in bandits. Bandits one's super easy. I chose to kill all bandits because none of the other ones help us at all. I guess Illyria kind of does with increased elemental resistances. However, that doesn't compare to the 2 additional passive skill points that we get from killing all. And now when it comes to Pantheon, I chose Garukin, mainly because we get our chance to evade attack hits, as well as our increased movement speed. It's just more of a quality of life for me personally. However, Gruthgol as well as Raslotha are both very viable choices, especially if you're not a big fan of lab running, etc. I'll usually spec over to Raslotha, like pre-Uber Lab or something. However, this is my most comfortable one. I tend to use as the minor one. Soul of Solaris is my go-to for the major. However, Lunaris is also an optimal choice with a 1% additional fizz reduction for each nearby enemy up to 8%. However, I am primarily a boss killer. Boss content is my favorite thing to do and favorite thing to run. So the 6% increased additional fizz reduction while there is only one nearby enemy, as well as 20% chance to take 50% less area damage from hits is just really strong. And as you can see, I haven't even bothered doing my Divine Vessels to unlock the other souls. I did do the movement speed one just because I like to be a speedy boy. However, the other ones I do need to work on, as they are also very important, but it kind of goes to show not even min-max, still able to do what we need to be doing. Finally, let's watch our build in action with an Uber Itziri kill. Uber Itziri tends to be one of the bosses that a lot of builds tend to skip, and being that our build can clear any and all in-game bosses, this is a showcase in its power. So next we're going to go into our Uber Itziri kill. To be honest, this is just the only full set I had on me at the time, and Uber Itziri is still a very big boss to achieve the kill on. So we're going to go ahead and showcase the build with this particular fight. We're probably going to speed up through just going through the ads and straight to the bosses. And let's take a look here. See how fast we can bring these dudes down. And let's take a look here. See how fast we can bring these dudes down. Gosh, this animation is probably the worst part of this fight, to be honest. It takes forever for these dudes to come up. I do have a curse, don't I? All right, one's down. Oh, I guess we didn't get our curse directly on that one as we should have. Oh, there he is. Ooh, buddy. That one was a little bit spooky, wasn't it? All right, next, this one's a little bit creepy when it comes to the on-death mechanics that tend to happen. Something we have to be very cognizant of. As you can see, our deeps is clearing them fairly smoothly. Make sure not to die here, right? Just need a moment to catch my breath. And now we're going to go into the fight itself. Bow to your queen, mortal. Queen of one and all. As you can see, she phases fairly quickly. We're not too worried about the reflect one, but we are worried about the stuff on the ground. He goes down. Oh, you're forgetting that's probably not a good idea to curse something that reflects curses, right? Oh. Bow to your queen, mortal. Queen of one and all. As you can see, we're able to drop a lot of wither on them really quickly. Oh. Should be going down. There we go. All right, so now we're in the ads phase. As you can see, her health is like really low now. Just trying to make sure we don't whiff. I just drop caustic ground everywhere, so that way as soon as they spawn, they just kind of not be alive anymore. Should be ready. There we go. Oh, get out of there. There it is. And there's the death. As you can see, was in fact Uber Atziri. As we got the sacrificial garb, red map, and I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure you guys please hit that like and subscribe button down below. And let me know if maybe there's something I may have forgotten in the build. And feel free to reach out to me in my Discord, which I'll have the server link down below, or on Twitter, or in one of my live streams, anywhere at all. I really love this build a lot. So if you have any kind of questions or anything I can do to help you out even more, just let me know.